through some sort of questions. Because my dad gave me just a bunch of notes because he spoke to you on the phone.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Sort of like a brief overview of
Yes.
the events in your life and everything. And I was quite interested by quite a few of them. I was like, I don't think I can cover all of them because it's only a 3 to 5 minute piece.
Yeah,
But,
because I don't know how long you want to dwell on things or what you want them explaining.
But I can, if you.
What I've done a circle.
Yeah.
I've started off at Garth Mill in 1926. Reputations of it. And I've done, due to the political views and the political things, 1930s, Great Strike, father lost his farm. We went to Shrewsbury area, and then of course I was a young fellow of 18, went mad. I've been around a great deal. This is pretty tame here, because I can't drive. I've got eyesight difficulties, and not caused through any service. It's just wear and tear, I presume. So there's nothing I can do about that. They see me in the clinic in Australia, but the doctor never turned up on Wednesday. I was not so pleased. Not so pleased. Because they soon grumble if you don't turn up to their surgeries. Yeah, and I had to spend £5 on a taxi to get there in time because I walk so slowly these days that I'm a bit different than what I used to be.
Yeah. As I mentioned, it's a very sort of, it's different because people who can drive, they can just sort of head down and then head back. But if you actually got to sort of pay to get there, it's especially annoying. Because it's annoying when you just have to wait for a doctor if they don't actually turn up.
Yeah, and I was there. I was sitting there from 1:30 till 3:30. And it was then I was told by one of the nurses there, Dr. Craig won't be coming today. I'm afraid he's too busy. He's too busy in Birmingham. Well, he would have known that.
Yeah.
Before I even turned out of here, really. So I rely now on bus services because I've got a car, but I can't drive it.
Yeah.
Well, I've got to think. I've got to think about other people.
Yeah, I mean, you made it a lot further than I did in regards to eyesight because I'm 18 and I'm already wearing glasses.
Yeah, mind you, I started wearing glasses when I just after I came out of the forces. I found reading the small print in law books. I couldn't see it, so I had to go for glasses, and so I've been wearing them since 23, 24. I don't wear them all the time, of course. I do for reading and distance. But what I've got, I had a fall in the garden here, and I banged my head on a paving slab. Because I grow fuchsias for a hobby. Well, of course I can't do that now. Colour is important, and here, and I get so annoyed with myself that I can't express myself very well because you're not seeing so well through these. And the left hand one is the one where I did the damage. I dislodged the muscle apparently as I banged my head on the stone. And that's not detached, but it's slinging loose. Apparently, this is how he explains it. And there's nothing he can do about it for me. It's just in the left eye, and I see there's two of you sitting there, not one, just two. And which is, it's so disconcerting to have something like that. And when I got television, I've got a patch I put over one eye. And and I can see with my one eye like this. It's not 100%, but at least it's the two. You see, you've got four lenses I'm looking at. Can't imagine it, can you really?
It's sort of the classic sort of cartoon thing when someone's on the head and then it's all it is and stuff.
Yeah. So how do you want me to set this up? But you tell me what you want.
Well, so I've got a sort of little presentation at the moment, which is just sort of these facts written in different slides and everything.
Yeah.
I'm quite fascinated by the Shrewsbury Home Guard,
Right.
the Army Middle East.
By the way, you can see Shrewsbury Home Guard. Make a note there. On if you go on.
It's got it on
You got Google, have you? Have you looked at it?
Yeah, I had a brief look at the sort of images and stuff, and then I think, well, I obviously I didn't know what you looked like, so I didn't know if I was seeing pictures.
No.
Of you or anything.
Of a 17-year-old
Yeah.
with a Sten gun, yes.
Yeah,
Very interesting days, Home Guard.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of contact with Toby Neal of the Shropshire Star. And there's a book, my daughter bought a book from the library in the music hall in Shrewsbury. And I'm in there, Home Guard. I don't know why why the Home Guard should come up, but I suppose it's history, isn't it, really? And at a pretty difficult time, too, when I was a 16-year-old. Well, so you could join at 16. So do you want to go back to the beginning? Born in...
I mean, I'm quite interested in your sort of like general story, and if there's anything that I want to sort of like pry into more, I can sort of start in and,
Well, I started off. My mum and dad got married, didn't they? And I was born on a farm at Garthmill called Cumgoid, and it's Cumgoid is Goose Valley. Did you know that? No, there you are. It was Goose Valley. That was the name of in English. That is part of the Vayner estate. Mother and father got in difficulties in the late 20s after I was born, and in consequence, the bailiffs came and took all the animals and what have you. So we were left with nothing. My grandparents on my mother's side were from Llandustle, and so I was palmed out with my grandfather at a little farm called Castle in the Wind. And from there I went to school. Now that's an interesting little point on the school, because my grandfather, by the way, took me to school because my father and mother went around. They were trying to search somewhere else to live, you know. And he took me to Llandustle School, introduced me to the headmaster. There was only about 25 in this school, and he did say, interestingly, you do speak Welsh in this school, don't you? You do teach Welsh. And he said, no, I'm not allowed to. I will get fined if I teach Welsh in this school. And it was against the law then. So I was in that period where if I wanted to speak Welsh, I was in Wales and I couldn't speak it. So that was a bit disappointing, really. But anyway, I didn't pursue it. But that's a memory that I carried forward from there. And interestingly, the school have got a photograph of the class itself as a 5-year-old, and who's sitting on the front row? Me. Which was quite interesting, really. I didn't think I'd catch up, but I did see my mother and father's wedding certificate, and I didn't learn anything more from that. I knew they got married at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning, so a lot of people wouldn't be around to see them. I don't know why, but they did just that. From there, we circulated amongst different relatives, Churchstoke, Llandustle, and then we finished up at a farm at Longdon. Longdon is on the road into Shrewsbury from Minsterley, and my sister by this time had arrived, and my sister and I went there to school. What was the name of the farm? Oh, I've forgotten it offhand. But anyway, we were there for several years, and then we moved into Shrewsbury. Father found a little farm for rent on the Berwick estate, about 30 acres, and we gradually built up there. It had a big orchard this place, and it had a big garden, and we as a family, we dug it over, and that was it. And in the background, of course, there's all this trouble with government, and well, we got in trouble, didn't we, with bankruptcies and miners' strikes and what have you. I don't remember these, but I went into Shrewsbury, and we were parked out at a school called St Michael's School, which is in the roughest part of Shrewsbury. So it did me in good stead when I became a bobby. I'd been to school with all the characters, that did all the thieves and vagabonds. So I knew most of them, and of course I was on question name terms, and it was an asset, really. But that's just jumping ahead. But yes, I remember the Silver Jubilee of King George and Queen Mary. I actually saw them on the Queen. I actually saw the Queen opening the bypass in Shrewsbury, and that was 1920. Well, it was in the beginning of the 1930s. And that's when my brother came along. He lives in Ardleed now. So by this time, there's my sister and I and my brother, mother and father. During this time, they were quite hard workers, my folks. They gradually bought 3 or 4 cows. So we had 6 cows. And then we opened up a milk round, and that built up gradually, and we went to school from there, and then I went on to the grammar school in Shrewsbury, to the Prior Boys, like my brother did later, but that was in I don't know, when was I? 1935. I went to the grammar school. And then I stayed there until I was 16, doing all the usual stuff that they do in grammar schools. I've got to admit that I never liked it there. It was all Shakespeare and rugby. I wanted soccer and something else, So I was a bit disillusioned with the grammar school. I didn't do very well. And on top of that, we had a farm, and we had a milk round in the morning and in the evening. So life was not easy. Life was pretty tough. And the only way my brother and I made any money was catching rabbits. We had a ferret. And also too, I wanted a bicycle, which my father couldn't afford to buy me. And I bought a small pig and took it home, reared it, bought it for sixpence, mind you, and sold it for £2. And so I had a new bike. I had a new bike to go to school. And that's how I got it. You got to do it own initiative. Saturday afternoons I used to spend going around with 1 or 2 old ladies that we delivered milk to, doing the gardens. So that was the pocket money. We never got any pocket money from home. We couldn't afford it. That was it. And we sold fruit. It was a huge garden. We had wonderful fruit there. My brother and I often talk about it now, the wonderful Plenty Orange apples and William pears and heaven knows what. And during this time, I got a job. I left school at 16, and I went in the post office. They were advertising for temporary people at Christmas time in 1942. Yeah, was it 42? Yeah. And I went there as a postman. It stood me in good stead afterwards. I didn't take up post office as a career, but at least it kept me going until I joined the army. And also too, I went in the Home Guard then at 16. Great adventure there, because our farmhouse was the platoon headquarters. It was great, we were lots of pals, and it was a military background, really. often used to go to the barracks in Shrewsbury and to Church Stretton. There was another. I remember being in Church Stretton with a Sten gun, and the fellow next door to me, we were firing live ammunition, and his little finger disappeared. Got chopped off. He was from Ludlow. I never saw him again. That was Ashes Valley. I always remember that very clearly. We used to go for weekend training. Well, I could talk father into letting me go. Yeah, so did we have any clubs? Yes, and I went to a couple of Christian clubs. We were a member of the St Mary's Choir. My brother and I and my sister. I was in St Mary's School. I was in St Mary's Church Choir when war broke out, and that was quite an affair. And I can still go and point to the seat in St Mary's Church where I was sitting when war broke out, and that's where I met Toby Neal of the Shropshire Star, and he found me quite an interesting character with the Home Guard and what have you, and of course this coronation too. He was behind all this. He still writes in our local paper, this paper that comes out here locally. Graham Breeze lives down there across the road. I don't know whether you know him. Do you know him? No. He was the editor of the County Times. He's now a county councillor. And we all, on speaking terms, he comes across to see me occasionally. Then I was in the Home Guard and used to have training every Sunday. Sometimes we'd have weekend manoeuvres. That was quite interesting. All from a military point of view, really. Barracks. We used to go firing range on the Wrekin rifle range. I was one of the members of the Home Guard team. We used to take the Americans on from Atcham Camp, and that was quite interesting. We used to shoot for money too. Shouldn't have told anybody about that, but anyway, we used to. Americans were great fellows, really. And then I did one or two courses. I did a course on the Blacker Bombard, anti-tank. I think you used to fire at tanks and blow them up. And I did that course way over in Bobington by Market Drayton. Not Market Drayton, by Wolverhampton. It was that one. So, and I also did a course at Altcar in Liverpool. Centres on, sharpshooting ranges, which are all very interesting for a lad, 16, 17, great for firing a rifle. And then I was on the post office all the time, and on the post office I ran post offices occasionally as a postman. Used to cycle out from Shrewsbury to with the base at Montfort Bridge at the post office there, and incidentally, the son was the policeman then, lives in Welshpool, down Gungrug Road. I had himself a chat with him about his father. His father's dead now, but his father was alive then. He served with me as well. And then came, of course, the forces. You got to, there's no escape for you. Everybody would have to go to the forces. And because I was 6 years older than my brother, so he was not eligible. My sister stayed at home, and she worked in the bank, Lloyd's Bank in Shrewsbury. And all her number of shoes. Yes, it was quite a busy little farmhouse, but particularly Mother used to make toffee apples and anything to supplement an income, because out of here they had nothing. They came out of Garthville Farm, and they really had nothing. I admire them. They were quite hardy folks, really. And you've got relatives. You did have relatives living in Gilsfield. They've both gone now. The Chislett family. But anyway, they were relatives. They're still about here, Churchstoke, and one or two round Llanrussell. They're still about there. I had dinner the other day with one from Churchstoke here in the middle now. I had a long chat with him. Just lost his wife, unfortunately. That's beside the point. So I went in the army. You didn't have much choice. You just went where they sent you. And I had an awful shock. I was going on duty at the post office, and Mother was coming home, having been to the market hall in Shrewsbury selling produce and what have you. And she said, "They've arrived." And I said, "Oh yes, what do you mean they? Your calling papers have arrived," she said. I said, "Have you opened them?" "No, I wouldn't," she said. So I said, "Come on, tell me." Well, when I got back home, I opened them up. They sent me to Canterbury, in the south of England, and yet there was a training base in the barracks in Shrewsbury. What's the point? Anyway, I went. And it was the time when all the flying bombs were about, and we were diving in different air raid shelters to get away from them. So I went to the Buffs depot. That was the name of the regiment in Canterbury. In actual fact, I quite enjoyed it. Some friends were crying, because they were upset, because it was pretty tough going. Well, I'd had all this in the Home Guard. I knew it was coming. I often used to go to sleep, but they were giving us lectures on hand grenades, and us used to upset the corporals. The corporal was from Bishop's Castle, so we were quite friendly, really. And the sergeant was a quite interesting character. He'd been in Dunkirk, and he used to tell us all kinds of stories. I remember the first day that he came out on the barrack square to join us, and there was 30 of us in a platoon, and he did a very surprising thing. He said, "We don't swear in this unit." He said, "Every time you swear, you have to put 3 pence in this little swear box." And he got a swear box in his back pocket. And there was fellows marching. There was 5 or 6 squads, men marching all over the place, this big barrack square. And there's he telling us about this. Well, now, I had a very good friend named Ernie Chivers, who joined up with me, and he slept on the top bank, and I slept on the bottom one. And he was a member of a choir in in London, St Martin's in the Fields he was in. And as I used to go to church on a Sunday, we missed it, and we used to go on a Sunday to Canterbury Cathedral, which was only just down the road. And the first time we went, I said to Martin, "Martin, look who's in the choir." Our sergeant. And he was in the choir going, the procession up to the altar. And so we knew then about his swearing, and we never heard him swear. Never. It was very good. A platoon sergeant. You got all these regimental sergeants. Yeah, so Ernie Chivers, we parted company there. We had corps training, and most of the people in the platoon we were in were being posted to the. We were in Normandy then. The invasion had taken place, and most of those fellows were going, and I was posted to the regular battalion of the infantry in Normandy. And on the Saturday morning we were in the usual Saturday morning drill, and I was always right marker for our platoon, 6 foot, you see, so right marker. And then halfway through, he said, the regimental sergeant major came out, who was, the top man, came out, and he said, "There's been some alterations to the postings." And he said, "Number 1 platoon, Rowlands, put your hand up." And Chivers, and another couple, "You're being posted to Nottingham. You're not to go into so being a postman saved my life. I was going to the Army Postal Depot, where there was a huge row going on at the moment at that time in Parliament with Winston Churchill about men in the army not getting their mails. And it was quite a serious matter, really, when you think of fellows out there, away from their wives and families and what have you. And this applied to the Far East as well. So we were posted, and I think I never worked so hard in all my life as clearing those mails to those fellows in Normandy and in Italy. We were fighting then in Italy. We were fighting in the Middle East, Palestine, Abania was it? Then we got the troubles in India. That's where my daughter is at the moment. In Burma, and then and of course it was in the UK as well. So yeah, that's what the situation was there then. So I went to Nottingham. I trained. That's a nice little story. You used to have to as you were going, we went to the Royal Engineers. The Army Post was part of the Royal Engineers setup. And we had to pass what they call a trade test. In other words, you could sort mails by a certain time. You were given 100 postcards with names and addresses on, and you had to sort these within an half hour, or I can't remember the time now. And rather interesting one. There was one amongst the group that I'd got. All the fellows got totally different, and we were sorting them out. And the one was addressed to a Mr. and Mrs. Jones. I can't remember the name of the farm. There's both a Kibbai. So the sergeant, of course I put it in Shrewsbury. You sorted all mails for this area to Shrewsbury. I knew that. And afterwards the sergeant took me on one side. He said, "Do you know what? I've been at this job here now for 2.5 years. You're the first one that's got that right. Both the Kibbai." It's out in the wilds. And how I knew it, I'd been with my grandfather in a horse and trap to pick up a tup. One of the sheep, because he bred carry a flock of sheep, and they carried, and so that's why. And I passed immediately, having known that, I could pick this up in Wales. Anyway, that's the sideline of the Welsh story. So that could have saved my life as well. But anyway, this was in the August 44. Yes, August 44. And I was in Nottingham, and my name went up on the draft list for India. And then so we prepared to go to India, went on embarkation leave, they called it, and we were due to report back at this depot we were in, which was at Halifax, Duke of Wellington's barracks in Halifax. From there we went up to Glasgow. I got on this ship with all the other people. There was hundreds because war in Europe they could see was going to come to an end, and that they were shipping all us people to the Far East and the Japanese. So, but anyway, luck and judgment again. I went and reported to the orderly room, and they said, yes, you'll have to have a medical examination. So I have a medical examination on the boat, all the men, there was thousands on this boat. And we were all worried about submarines even then, they were about. Anyway, what happened then? Yes, I had a medical examination, and I had a carbuncle came on the side of my face. Never had one before, never had one since. More luck than judgment. And I was put off the boat at Gibraltar. From Gibraltar I went to Malta. Malta, I went, they were fighting in Italy, of course, still. And I went to Valletta. And then I went to Naples. When I got to Naples, I was posted to an army post office outside Rimini. And the thing about Rimini is, I've just had an article in the Best of British magazine. I bought a watch in Rimini for 50 cigarettes, and I've still got it, and it still goes. So I still use it when this backs up, when these batteries go. It's a spring watch. We gave 50 cigarettes, but that's a sideline story. So I went up to, and eventually finished up in Austria. When the fighting finished, we didn't see much of that. We could hear it in the distance. San Marino, we were quite near San Marino, a place called Forlì, where Mussolini was born. Anyway, I went right up into Klagenfurt in Austria. So the most wonderful thing, as we went up, there was a sergeant and myself, 4 other men, and we had an army post office, which we opened up in Klagenfurt. The Schwarzadler Hotel took it over from the Austrians. And we had a wonderful reception from the Austrian people. Really did. I must say that. They were excellent, and I made friends there. Even the daughter of one of the people I befriended came to my daughter's wedding here in Bala. But that's another big story. But and one of the daughters that we were friendly with, she's now a member of the European Parliament in Brussels. So I'm in touch with her. Occasional email, Then what happened after yes, I was a sapper then, or a private. I was promoted corporal and posted to Milan. Oh, when I got to Milan, they sent me to Rimini. I was in charge of the army post office then in Rimini. And all the troops that were in that district, American as well as Poles, there was hundreds of them. Gurkhas, you named it, they're all there. Then from there, where did I go? I know, the chief of the camp, Major Barrett, he thought he'd like to have me as chief clerk in Milan, so I was posted to Milan as a sergeant. And I went from, so I was there for a little while. I said to him, by the way, there's a leave centre at Como. Would you let me go for a few days? Because I haven't had any leave for ages. And he said, yeah, go on. So I went, and I stayed in a place named Como. And I didn't come back for 3 weeks because they pitched Mussolini's body out of the cemetery at Como. Oh, fun and games, British soldiers not been murdered, but been assaulted. And, but that's another story, that is. Then I came back one day, and he said, I'm sorry, Rowlands, I'll have to get rid of you. He said, but I'm going to promote you. I'm going to send you as a staff sergeant to Bologna. He said, I want you to take charge of the British Army Post Office in Bologna. And he was coming back to the depot in Nottingham. So I was promoted to staff sergeant or quartermaster sergeant, and in charge of about 15 men there. Very interesting. Never worked so hard in all my life. Oh, the mail we used to get, and we used to share it with the Americans. So in fact, at that stage, I was in charge of all army postal services in northern Italy, which was quite interesting. Sitting from Bolzano up in the Brenner Pass, right down to Ancona, midway down Italy, just at the earthquake there. And now this is a very interesting side. The next story. I'm in Bologna, and I recruited this little man to help us out with. I used to get in terrible trouble with wages for the staff. I got civilian staff as well that I had to pay. And so anyway, with the help of the local vicar, army chaplain to the British war, he got onto somebody, he got onto somebody else, and I went down to Rimini Airport and asked to select a little chap and his name was Isaac Lands. He's the one that I said is most interesting man I've ever met. And it was his story that appeared in the Best of British magazine. And quite a quick story about him. He didn't speak much English when he came to us. And within a matter of several months he could speak English fluently. He was of Polish origin. I had him on and I talked to my sergeant into letting him stay and have meals with us, because he was a member of staff as far as I was concerned. And so he introduced it to spaghetti bolognese together with my secretary. I was going up in the world here. I'd got my own car as well, which is a little Fiat Opel Kadett, and that was I got in a roundabout way by finding a sergeant from the where is that racing circuit now outside Bologna. Anyway, Scott. He told me I spotted one day that he'd got the Star of David tattooed on his wrist. That's what they did to all prisoners, the Gestapo. So, and I said to Harry, who was my sergeant, I said, "You don't say a word." So anyway, one night I got him on my own, and we had a chat about general things in the post office, how we could improve things. And I asked him, I said, "Dare I ask you, Isaac, would you care to tell me the history of the Star of David?" "Oh yes," he said. So he told me that he had been the managing director of the only Polish oil field, and his brother was also in charge of an oil well. And the Gestapo had left them alone because they were running so well as Jews. Anyway, they turned up early one morning. They took his brother and his wife and his two boys, and they took Isaac's wife and two boys, and off they went. And I said, "Were we able to pick up anything?" "No," he said. "They took us like in cattle wagons and took us to Mauthausen concentration camp, which is on the border of Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. It's in the triangle. I've not been there. I saw enough. Anyway, he told me that. So I said, "Well, tell me, how did you survive?" Because I said, after all, the two families. And he said, "I survived because of this." And he got a little violin, which his father had bought him when he was a 5-year-old for a Christmas present. And he brought it with him. And he was recruited into the orchestra, reception orchestra. I've heard of them, reception for these Mauthausen, these concentration camps. They used to have an orchestra playing them when they came in. So that's how he went into a concentration camp. Unfortunately, I was unable to see his story right through. I tried to find out relatives, and I got the American Red Cross on it. They were doing a wonderful job. Now, I'll never know if he ever. I've looked on internet. There was lots of Lances on the internet that were inmates of this concentration camp, but he's not recorded. However, that's sideline. I felt very sore about that. I was a young chap who'd not seen much of the war really. Yeah, so then I came home on leave once. I'm jumping ahead. Whilst at Bologna, I had my first leave, 19 days in the UK. And so I also went, I've forgotten his name now, with a fellow who wouldn't go home. He was on my staff, and by this time I'd been promoted. No, I'm jumping ahead far too. Let's get it right, to get it in Liverpool Street Station in London, and my name comes over the tannoy, would I report to the railway transport officer. Went there. "Ah, Rowlands," he said, "I'm glad to see you." He said, "I got two bits of news. One's good and one's bad. Now, which do you want first?" I said, "Well, the good news," he said. "Oh, the good news," he said, I want you to take a draft of army personnel, army educational personnel, to Krefeld in Germany. Will you do that for me?" "Yes," I said, "yeah, quite, I'll do it." But he said, I said, "What's the second one?" He said, "You've been promoted company sergeant major." "What? Me?" He said, "Yes," he said, "and you're not to go back to Bologna. You're to go back to Villach in Austria, Dragonfeld." And I said, "What am I going to do?" He said, "You're going to be the company sergeant major for the Middle East, based at the 15 base Army Post Office, and you'll be in charge of discipline and leave and what have you." Me reaching the rank of company sergeant major, marvellous rank, really. You couldn't think of a better one. I've still got the jacket here, which I'll show you presently. Anyway, he said, "Wish me luck," and I went back and I went to the transit camp in Villach to be met by my sergeant in charge of the Army Post Office in this camp, a fellow named Jenkins from South Wales. Shook hands with me and he said, "Pleased to see you, another Welshman. Another Welshman's been promoted, you know." So he said, "I'm to take you back to the unit. You've not been, have you?" I said, "No, I haven't." And when we got there, he said, "I'm warning you, there's trouble." "Oh, what is it?" He said, "The first job you're going to have to do it, one of your fellows has committed suicide, and they don't know what to do." "Well, what do you expect me to do?" I was green to all these things, all these procedures. And there are procedures in the army in dealing with, somebody's ill or leave or all these. And the company sergeant major is the man who has to know these things. That's beside neither here nor there. I had to deal with several cases of venereal disease when I was there amongst the others, because I got a big unit there of about, what have I got? At one stage I was nearing about 70, I think. So it was quite a big unit, and to keep all those happy, and that was the problem there. They'd got a leave backlog, and all the men were disenchanted. So that was it. I still look at I can look at the unit on on my iPad, and it comes up at Oberfellach, and I can see where my unit. There's an Austrian unit at the moment, signals. Or since in the unit that I was in. And then when I came back, incidentally there, taking Yankers parade and what have you, people in trouble. And the CO said, "Stay behind, Rowlands." He said, "I want to have a chat with you." So I did. He said, "I've got a shock for you." "Oh," he said, "would you accept a commission?" "Officer rank, no?" And he said, "I want you to go to Malta, take over the Army Post Office in Malta. It warrants a lieutenant's post." Oh dear, oh dear. Now then, my father had written to say that he was taking a bigger farm here now in the Ree Valley. So foolishly, I didn't take it. But I did recommend a fellow named Boston, who was a member of my sergeant's mess. I'd got about 30 members sergeants in the mess there, which I had to keep in order. That took some doing. Anyway, so I came out. I was demobbed, and I had got my eye on a very nice lady. I'd never bothered with women before. I was then, as a company sergeant major, I was 23, quite young really, Sergeant majors, they're 40 before they're promoted in the guards these days. So, and the fellow who took my place, a fellow named, I forgot his name now, and he came from Surrey somewhere. He took it. He was in Malta for about 6 months, got promoted to full lieutenant, from a full lieutenant. He got posted to Germany, a captain. He took his boss's post and we got promoted major. This is where I could have gone, you know. This is as a regular soldier. And when he got promoted major, he made acting lieutenant colonel and posted to Korea, because the Korean war had broken out then. And so that's where he went, and we corresponded for some years. He never married, and he opened up a insurance broker's firm when he finished with the army, so that was quite interesting. And I then, well, I got my eye on a lady who I'd met through the army when I was in Rimini, when I said I gave all those money for those cigarettes. Cigarettes to buy a watch. I was in there one day with a fellow that I had three fellows there with me, one from Deal in Kent, and I've since met him. He's passed away now, unfortunately. I haven't got many pals left. We'd got a scourge in Italy of sandfly fever, and it was similar to mosquitoes. But if you put a mosquito net up, you stop them biting you, which can cause like a form of scurvy. And anyway, I put my mosquito net up, and when I got into bed, we got these little transit beds we got into bed at night. There was a piece of paper in the seam. So I looked up at it, and it says, "Please tear off." I haven't got it now, fortunately. It was stolen in my kit in Germany, but that's another story. I opened it up, and it said, "If you care to write to this address, you'll be sure to get a reply." It was a lady in Buxton who'd made this note and made the mosquito net. So, of course, my pals, they pulled my leg, didn't they? So I wrote, and I had a lovely letter back. I think I took a prisoner home who'd been convicted for pinching some males. I took him home to Halifax, and I lifted a couple of days, extended my leave for 2 or 3 days, and I went to see her. She had a bit of a shock. She lived in Buxton in Derbyshire, and I made efforts to find her. I did find her eventually, but that's a long story. But she never knew that I was asking after her, and I had at the back of my mind that I fancied her so much that I would marry her, you know. As if I was going in the police force. Well, you want a wife, really, particularly in Derbyshire. But anyway, I didn't. When I got home, I went to see her, and she'd married somebody else. So I was shattered. So I didn't bother with women for a long time. I went in the police and did my training at Wrighton-on-Dunsmore in Coventry, and did service in Shrewsbury, Bridge North, Open Gates, and I've only got one pal still alive, and he lives in Oswestry. From my time then, you know, when I was a police officer. I quite enjoyed my time. Anyway, I got involved in a fatal accident, which I ricked my back and finished up in the orthopedic. And then I decided, well, what was I going to do? My wife and I talked about it. By this time I married a nurse from the RSI in Shrewsbury, and she was a native of Bala. So I got a Welsh-speaking member of the family at long last. Then I decided, we did talk about the church. I did think about the church at one stage, because I've been involved with churches all my life, really. And then we talked it through, and I came to the conclusion that I really couldn't put a commitment to the church, really. I'd go in for social work. So I took up social work, got qualified, worked in Shrewsbury for a little while in the education department, And then I saw a job advertised in Wigan. Promotion. They were wanting a team leader for their social work team in Wigan. Incidentally, I became a magistrate there, juvenile court magistrate. Must have thought something of me. And from there, I did the social work course, and then I did a course in senior management at Liverpool Polytech, which stood me in good stead. When I got back to Wigan, a national conference was coming up, a national conference of the National Association of Chief Education Social Workers. So I went, and standing by the bar that evening was my colleague from East Sussex, Lewis in East Sussex. So he said, "Just the fellow I want to see." I said, "Oh, what do you want, Desmond?" He said, "Would you like my job?" It's a blow. I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I'm retiring next month." And he said, "My chief education officer, I want you to find a replacement from me, from your association." There's a national association, you see. So he said, "I recommend you." He said, "Would you like to go and live near Beachy Head?" I said, "No, thank you." Anyway, I had a chat with my wife. I said, "What do you fancy moving?" "Oh," she said, "I like it in Wigan." And she did. We really settled in Wigan. It was a wonderful social place. There was social life in that place. Anyway, for an enhancement in salary, the East Sussex County Council offered me quite a substantial rise in money to take the job. Mind you, I didn't really know what I was taking on at the time, but anyway, I did see the job description, and anyway, I got interviewed by the chief constable, the chief education officer, and he offered me the job. So I rang my wife and I said, "I've been offered the job, shall I take it?" She said, "Yes." And that was it. Well, as long as I got her on my side. After all, women do suffer when they get moved around a great deal. So I went to Sussex, I lived just outside Eastbourne, and I was there for 10 years together. So, yes, and I became chief education social worker. During the time there, I was also elected president of my National Association, and the ceremony was in Llandudno in 1982. So, and I've still got my presidential address. So that's, and then when it came to retirement, they offered me retirement. I was over 60, and I thought, "Oh, this job is too tough." Incidentally, it was unusual injury to children who were knocked about by their families. That was my job, the basis of the job. Although I had a team of 45 there.